Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. This is our ProLink HFA webinar series. We host this webinar on a monthly basis. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today as we discuss managing dev draws in the ProLink HFA dev module. For today's presentation, I'm going to be covering a brief summary of ProLink for those who may be less familiar with our company. We'll then turn it over to Nick, who will be discussing managing dev draws. So, I'm Alexa Sanchez. I'm the Sales and Marketing Associate here at ProLink. Nick Jacques is our Senior Product Owner at ProLink. Nick primarily focuses on ProLink AIM, but he also supports other products like ProLink HFA, and he partners with our clients to enhance these products. Now I'll walk through an overview of ProLink and who we are. We have supported the affordable housing industry for more than 25 years. We are currently supporting state and local housing finance agencies, tax credit syndicators, investors, and developers. We are fully dedicated to the affordable housing industry. We work hard to build systems that are holistic and valuable and connect all of the pieces and people together through tax credit origination and the continued provision of affordable housing. We build systems to support all different stages of your deal life cycle, as well as the collaboration and involvement you need from others. We have a great team of employees who share in the dedication to helping our clients solve the affordable housing industry. Our team consists of technical experts around affordable housing. We have a lot of 10 and 15-year plus team members at ProLink. They know your language and they speak your language and they know this business. Now, this is just a high-level picture of the agencies from across the United States that we support with ProLink HFA. We are currently supporting 18 housing finance agencies and 2 supportive service agencies, which are located in California and New York. Now, this is what we call our bird's eye view of our enterprise module for ProLink HFA. ProLink HFA always comes with these 3 modules available to our users. We have our tax credit allocation module, which we've been discussing mostly throughout the beginning of this year. We've recently switched into our development module and have been discussing the functionality that's available there. We'll likely talk about asset management and compliance at the beginning of the next year for our webinar series. So now I'm going to hand things off to Nick so he can discuss managing dev draws in the ProLink HFA dev module. Nick, if you could please take over screen sharing.
All right. One moment. How's that look?
Perfect.
Cool. All right. So like Alexa said, my name is Nick. I think I was lucky enough to meet some of you at the most recent in-person conference that we had. And today we're going to talk a little bit about dev draws and how that works in ProLink HFA. So if you're in this call, I probably don't need to tell you what a draw is, but just to set the context, at probably its most general definition, a draw is a disbursement of funds from some instrument of financing based on project completion or progress. Typically, this would happen after budgets are finalized, the funding has been secured and allocated, and construction has begun. And the draws would, reimburse a developer for the expenses they have accrued so far. So probably not learning anything new there, but just to set the context. In ProLink HFA, we have a draws module or feature where you can track and manage this process. There are a number of kind of prerequisites in the system for being able to manage draws based on kind of the deal state and what other associated records you have set up. And that's what we're going to kind of go through today in a demo. And then I guess another kind of keynote about the draws functionality is it's pretty flexible. So there's not just one way to do it, but I'll try and give you some best practices for, in our experience, what we've seen works well for people, and that it can be used for any number of funding sources or types of funding sources, whether those are internal or external funds. And then the last slide here just kind of shows there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle when it comes to draws. There's a lot of like associated entities and processes, whether that's on the financing side, if it's draws tied to a loan or a grant or tax credits, whether or not it's internal or external funding. The draw process itself has a number of steps involved in it and data points that are key to recording those records. And then from the deal itself, whether that's the deal budget, clicked again, deal budget or the deal status, there's just quite a few things that need to come together in order to start processing draws. And we're not going to get into everything today, but this just kind of shows all the pieces of that puzzle. So now we're going to jump into a demo. Oh, let me just bring that up. Okay, now you should be seeing my web browser here.
Yeah, we see it, Nick.
Cool. All right, so to start, this first couple steps is related to funding sources. It might be a little bit of a repeat of something you've seen in a previous webinar, but we can breeze through it. And I think it's important to setting the context for the draws themselves. So I guess at its most basic level, in order to have a draw, you need a source of money to pull from. So we're here in the utilities menu under the dev folder on the funding sources utility screen. And on this page, we can see all the funding sources currently in the system, and we can also use it to create a new funding source. So I'm just going to create one real quick. We'll call it webinar demo funding source. A few important fields to note here that relate back to draws. There's this source type field, which is required. And this field is kind of designed to support two different use cases. So our clients kind of have different ways that they like to manage and track funding sources. The external and internal options here support if your agency sort of doesn't desire to track the funding source amounts at like a granular level per funding source. They just want to kind of combine it all into one bucket of HFA funds. You can just select internal and it will do that. If you do desire that more granular tracking, you would select other here. I think the majority of our clients go with the other so they can do that more granular tracking of tying a draw to a specific funding source. So that's what we're going to go with. I would consider that to be the best practice. Another couple important fields are HFA dispersed and HFA monies. You'll want to check both of these as well to indicate that it's a funding source managed by your agency. And of course, we'll want to click active. And then a final checkbox here, we're going to leave or disabled, called require a financing source for this funding source. And basically, if that's checked on your dev deal, you would have to have a financing source record tied to the funding source in order to use it. But we'll leave that unchecked for this scenario. So we'll click save and return. Now that we have a funding source, we need to tell the system how much money is available for that funding source. So we're going to find my funding source. Oh, nope, just kidding. We're going to make a new one. And then we're going to find it here. Webinar demo funding source. We'll select a program type. And we'll just say this is a home rental development. And then we're going to set a fiscal year. So this is the year that the budget is available for. And then we'll give it a budget of $10 million. And then one final field to note here is the carryover fields. If you select this, any unallocated money from this fiscal year will get carried over into the next one, but we'll leave that unchecked for this scenario. Hit save and return. So now we're going to switch over to the deal side. I have this dev deal set up. It's pretty simple. There's nothing too special about it. And we need to do a couple things here before we can actually start recording draws. The first thing we're going to do is set the deal budget. So the deal budget is essentially the kind of granular line items of hard costs and soft costs for the project. And then also gives you kind of the sum total cost. So we're going to enter some values here. I'm going to try and make it add up to a nice round number. We'll say cabinets, carpets. Oh boy. There we go. Try and get it to add up to $1 million. Okay, so we've got hard costs of $1 million, and then we're going to set our soft costs. We'll make that add up to 500,000. We go back to the main tab. Nothing's in there yet. We've got to click save. So now we can see that our final dev budget amount is 1.5 million. And now that we have a budget amount, we can start assigning funding sources to the deal. So we go to the deal funding page here in the deal budget menu, click new. And from here, we're going to select the funding source that I just created, if I can find it. There it is. Most of the other fields on this page are really for informational purposes, so they don't actually require anything for this to function. It does show a couple of read-only fields, which are just informational about the funding source itself, so we can see that the source type is other, and that it is HFA dispersed and HFA money. So for this one, we're going to leave everything else pretty much blank. I'll just set the instrument type. We'll call it a direct loan, just so I can identify it. And we'll say it is new construction. And then the other important field that I almost forgot is the amount. So when you're setting up these funding sources, you'll want the sum total of all of your funding sources to equal the deal budget. So if it's going to cost 1.5 million to build the building, you should have 1.5 million in total funding. And for this deal, we're only going to add one funding source. So I'm just going to put it all here. Hit save. Now, another quick note that could trip you up if you're not aware of it is that after doing that, you need to go back to the edit deal page and you need to set the total development cost for the deal in a field here. So that's this field right here. And our total development cost should equal what the budget is. So it would be 1.5 million. We'll hit save. Now that all that's done, we can go back to the deal budget. And this is kind of the final prerequisite before creating draw records is you need to actually finalize the budget, which kind of sets it in stone. So once you've finalized the budget, you can no longer edit it. The only way to make changes to it would be through a change order. So you have that kind of initial record of what the budget was, and then any changes to the budget would be recorded in change orders. And there's one more thing. This isn't strictly required, but just for the sake of realism, we are going to progress the deal to the dispersing stage, and we are going to set the status to drawing. Oh, I am missing a program type. So we got a pretty helpful message there that my deal funding record needs to have a program type. So we'll go back in here and find that field. And let's see, we said instrument type was direct loan, so we'll say this is a deferred loan. Try that again. Okay. Now we have all those prerequisites set up. We can finally create our first draw record. So like I said earlier, the draws functionality is pretty functional. You could either create the records kind of as the draw requests come in, or if you have a draw schedule that's done in advance, you could create kind of stub out all your draw records in advance and then kind of fill them out as each draw request is fulfilled. But we're going to create our first one by clicking the new button here. Upon initial loading of the screen, a lot of fields are disabled, and you'll be able to kind of edit those after we've saved the initial record. So the first thing you'll want to do is ignore this page to start, and we're going to want to set how much the draw is for. And in order to set the amount of the draw, you don't set it directly in a field. What you do instead is you assign money to different line items within the budget. So we'll say in this request, they're drawing 50,000 for cabinets, maybe another 50,000 for demolition. And 50,000 for earthwork. And then we'll also want to draw some money for soft costs, and we'll say they're pulling 75,000 for permitting. So we've got both those values in. We'll go back to this overview page, and we can see that now the total draw amount is equal to the sum of our hard costs amount and our soft costs amount. But it's not locked in yet. We still have to click save. So I'm just going to stub in a couple additional fields. We'll set a wire number. We'll say the date received was yesterday. And for now, this is just kind of our initial record, maybe that we just received the request or we're kind of building this in advance. So I'm going to leave everything else blank. And we'll hit save. So now we have a draw created, but it has not been dispersed yet. There are a few additional fields to note here. One moment, let me just catch up with my notes. So there's a few fields that integrate really well with our workflows process. So if you want to set up a custom workflow for maybe approving draws or reviewing them, There's this ready for approval checkbox, which you could use as a trigger for a workflow, which might send off an email to the person responsible for approving it. You could also trigger a workflow based on these date fields here. If like date approved is set, maybe you could trigger an email or notification to your accounting department to actually process the disbursement. A couple other fields to note: if the draw has a retainage associated with it. So if some portion of the total draw amount will be retained in escrow or something, you can enter that amount here. In draw funds, so we have the draw amount, the total draw amount so far, but we haven't said where this money's coming from yet. And we're going to do that here in the draw funds grid. So we'll do that by clicking this add funding source to draw button. Oh, I guess I should save my changes first. Here we are. And we can see in this dropdown, we have that one funding source that I created and attached to this deal. You also see HFA funds and equity funds here. Those show up on every deal. But for this use case, we're going to select the funding source that I created. We'll see we see our total draw amount here of 225, and we're just going to make this one real simple. This draw only has one funding source, so we're going to enter 225,000 into here. Below this top section, there's a grid for deal funding source detail. In most cases, you probably won't need to use this. This would be if you wanted to further split the money across other funding sources. If you had kind of like a hierarchy of funding sources coming together to represent this funding source. But in this case, we just have the one. There's nothing complicated here. So I'm just going to put this same amount in this field as well. There's an additional field down here, or grid down here for loans. This funding source, we're not going to get into like creating a separate loan record, but just know that if you are using the loans module, you could also associate a loan to the funding source here as well. So we'll hit save. Or save and return, I guess, so we can go back. And so one kind of final note that after you do that, that might trip you up, is that in order to actually disperse the record, so we'll set an approval date. We'll say it just got approved. In order to set a disperse date, you may get this error message. It says disperse draw split must be equal to the total draw funds where HFA dispersed is equal to yes. So if you see that, it just means you need to specify in these fields here how that draw is being split up between internal and external funds. So for this one, in our kind of imagined scenario, this is just an internal funding source. Our total amount is 225. So we're going to enter that here as well. Before we actually progress this to disperse, there's a few other things to note on this page. If you would like, you can add a payee. Actually, it won't let me do it because I've already added a disperse date, so never mind. But if this button was available, you could assign a payee. Let's see if I can pull that up in another. One moment, just so you can see it. So while we wait for this page to load, the draw payees is useful for specifying where the money is being sent, payment types, any sort of information about the actual disbursement itself, or the payment instructions. That can all be done through the draw payee functionality. So that's more disbursement related. And then the change orders. So the change orders would be used for a couple things. First use case would be to kind of reallocate money within the budget. So let's say our demolition came in under budget, but our earthwork came in over budget. You could use a change order to move some of the demolition budget over to the earthwork budget. The second use case would be if the budget itself has changed, maybe the project has gone over cost or under cost. You could also do a change order to reflect that as well. And then you would see those change orders associated with the draw in this grid if you had one. Another thing to note is that there are a lot of fields here. You're probably processing quite a few draws. So the most common use case for our clients would be to do most of this through SmartDocs. So you could set up a kind of standard SmartDocs template for recording draw information and then upload that draw information into the system that way. One thing to note there is that you can't create the draw record from SmartDocs. You'd have to create the draw record in the system first, and then you can enter data into the record you created via SmartDocs. So just know that you have to create it manually first in the system, and then you can start to sync it through SmartDocs. So yeah, once all that is done, we've got, let's see, right now we have one dispersed draw of 225,000. If we go back to our deal budget and we look here, we can see that some of our values have updated. We've got total draws to date is 225,000. And that is because this second draw we created is still in the status of received. So the actual draw amount doesn't get deducted from your budget until the status is set to dispersed. And then we can also see our total budget remaining to draw has been updated. And if we go into hard costs, we can see that some of our line items have been drawn down as well. So we already drew 50,000 for cabinets. Our total budget was 100,000 initially. So now we have 50,000 remaining to draw there. So that is just a quick summary and demo of the draw functionality. That's all I had for today, and I'm going to pass it back to Alexis.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. I'm going to take over screen sharing. All right. Thank you again, Nick, for such a wonderful presentation. If you have any questions, please be sure to share those with us. We'll be sharing all of our presentation materials in the follow-up emails to everyone. Now, I want to wrap up this webinar to take a moment and introduce next month's webinar. Our next webinar is actually going to be the final webinar in our ProLinkHFA webinar series for 2025. This webinar, we're going to be pivoting into Perform Inspect. It's our new mobile app designed from the ground up to support the Inspire inspection standards in mind. This special webinar is going to be hosted by Connor McKenna. He's our Director of Product Strategy here at ProLink. This webinar is taking place the same day that HUD implements the new Inspire standards for state agencies. If you're wanting to learn about inspection software solutions, then this is the webinar for you. We're sharing the registration link in the chat right now, so be sure to click on that link and register for the next webinar. Thank you again for joining, and we hope to see you next month, and have a great rest of your month.